And welcome to Parenting on Empty. This is podcast number 9.
If I set my mind to it, I can accomplish anything. I believe in myself.
We're talking today about heroes, specifically how to make your own children heroes, and how that affects the way you look at your children. If you have the mindset that says, I want my children to be the best they can be, I want them to be heroes in my story, then that changes the way you think. It changes your attitude about how you handle even problems that the children have, or the character flaws that you may think your children have, and how you address those character flaws and how you address those issues.
And by hero, we don't necessarily mean that they're going to ride to someone's rescue. It's that they realize the potential that is inherent in their nature. That, as you said, that they just become the best person that they could be.
Right. They don't have to become some fantasy person who never makes a mistake, who always has the best attitude, who are always positive in every situation. They're just doing the best they can, and you see the best in who they are. You see them as people who are becoming better.
And I would say that part of that hero thing is also that you're aimed at something. A hero is always on a quest. They're trying to achieve something. And for me, part of helping to make your child into a hero is instilling in them a sense of purpose that is larger than themselves, that they feel is worth working toward, and that they feel the steps along the way are successful, that they can see themselves moving somewhere, and it's a place they want to be, and it's a place they admire.
That's very important. They have to know what your agenda is. That agenda being, I want to make my children heroes. I want them to feel very positive about what they're doing. I'm not trying to blow smoke. I'm not trying to just falsely build them up, but truly looking for the good qualities that they have and exploiting those good qualities and celebrating those good qualities.
Yeah, I think encouraging them at whatever level they are, that they can significantly contribute in the world, even though they may be only 5, even though they may be only 10, 12, 15, that you don't have to wait until you're grown up to make a difference, right, to do something substantial, right, in their world.
Let me tell you a story to illustrate what we're talking about. Our 13-year-old daughter, she's not a math whiz, and she's aware of that, and sometimes that discourages her, and her attitude about math is not good. And I think it's not good because she's not good at it. So she doesn't really relish delving into math problems. I think typically nobody likes to do things that they aren't successful at. And Mariah is no exception to that. So with that mindset, I'm trying to encourage her in any way that I can to continue to get better and better at math. And so I'm looking for ways to make her a hero, a math hero, as it were, in this particular instance. A few weeks back, I was videotaping a testimony that was being given by a forensic engineer concerning a car accident involving several vehicles. Now, the defense attorney, he was asking the engineer a long list of questions as they related to this accident. And one of the questions that the attorney asked was more like a math story problem. It went something like, how long does it take a car to travel 1.4 miles if the car is traveling at 60 miles an hour? Now, to be an engineer, you have to be very good at math. Those are the guys that walk around with calculators and slide rules and whatnot. So before the engineer answers this basic math question, he pulls out his calculator and starts punching in the numbers and writing figures down. And when it was all said and done, the guy took probably about two plus minutes to come up with the answer. So when I'm telling our daughter Mariah this story, and I get to the part where the attorney asks this math story problem, she runs, grabs a piece of paper, and comes up with the answer in a matter of seconds. And of course, I tell Mariah, how talented she is to come up with the answer so quickly. And she just beams. She says, wow, I knew something sooner than an engineer math genius guy knew. So why did I tell her this story? Because she ends up being a math hero in this story.
Well, you're applauding her success.
Yes.
And in applauding her success, she steps up to the bat. She decides, maybe I can play this game. Maybe I might be able to hit the ball out of the park. It might be possible.
Right.
And she just begins to live up to your expectations of her. And they're not the kind of expectations that people find depressing, because they're kind of perfectionist standards that are way above where the person is. They're the kind of thing where you say, I expect that you will be yourself. And the person that I see as yourself is an intelligent person, a person capable of these things that we're talking about, whether it's a math problem or any other issue that you're trying to deal with your child. But it's not setting up unrealistic expectations and wanting perfection. It's just asking them to use every ounce of potential that they have, every ounce of intelligence, every ounce of perseverance, and they will succeed at some point.
Right.
If you will stick with them through that whole process, they will succeed. And the backstory of this math thing was 2 years of homeschooling and sitting painstakingly for hours working on things like this math problem, one-on-one, until she began to really get the concepts. So it isn't just a eureka, wow, that just happened, no blood, sweat, or tears. That to make a child a hero takes a lot of focus, takes a lot of commitment, takes a lot of planning and intentional, purposeful action.
Right. And I think that's the secret. You have to be very purposeful in how you encourage the child. I think you have to be thinking about opportunities to do that, because it doesn't come natural. At least it doesn't come natural for me to just all of a sudden emote compliments and say, wow, you're so good at this, and wow, you're so good at that. I really do respect people that have that natural ability, people who are just encouragers naturally. And I love those people. I love to be around those people because they just emote that kind of positive attitude.
Well, it's energizing.
It is.
Negativism is very defeating and discouraging, and you have to use a lot of energy just to overcome that. It drags you down.
Right.
And I am also an opponent, just as I'm an opponent to negativism, I'm also opponent to what you mentioned earlier, the just kind of hot air, blowing smoke, saying, yeah, this is awesome, you're the greatest, over nothing.
Yeah.
Because all that does is deceive your child. And that's not the truth.
Right.
And I want my child to succeed truthfully, not walk out into the world and think, I am great at this, when they're just not at all.
Well, that's true. That's true. And I think you make adjustments along the way. We have a 5-year-old who just loves to dance. Now, is she going to be a contestant on So You Think You Can Dance or Dancing with the Stars someday? Maybe. I don't know. But right now, she's not like this great professional dancer with all these incredible moves. But I tell you, I tell her that I love those dances. You are so good. Now, am I being honest? Well, I'm not necessarily giving an accurate representation of those talents, but I really enjoy her dancing. She has such great energy and her face just lights up. And the more you encourage her, the more she does. And she spins and does all kinds of things. And she's just enjoying this experience.
Well, and the bottom line is when you are talking about the developing of children, the growing of children, you're not judging them by the standards of a person professional in the field or a person who's trained or a person who is significantly older than them and
Correct.
in a totally different developmental level.
Right.
So when you say to your 5-year-old, that was an amazing dance, it can be based on what 5-year-olds tend to do. If she's inventive, if she's original, if she's uninhibited, if she moves her body in a variety of directions and shows flexibility and exuberance and joy, yeah, it's great. And I don't consider that empty praise. Empty praise, I think, is purposeless. It
Right.
just tries to make people feel better. It's not necessarily trying to make them improve.
And I really think that the more we can encourage her in anything, whether it's dancing or drawing or whatever it is, we can start to really feed into her mindset that, yes, I can accomplish anything I want to be. Yes, I can be a hero. Because it's often said that in any endeavor, the older we get, we do start to believe the negative remarks. Mm-hmm. And so when we are older adults, nobody's putting our drawings on the refrigerator door. Nobody is telling us, wow, you are so good at parking. That is so good. You are just the best parker there ever was. Man, the way you can make change when you go to the store to buy a pack of gum. Nobody is giving us these kind of really high energy compliments. But what we do get often are the negative side of our actions. We're told we're not competent, or we're no good, or we sometimes get insults throughout the day just from the angry public or whatever it is. And we really buy into that. We accept that. And so what I know is what happens is we shut down because we don't want to take a risk. Again, as I said on the outset, we don't want to participate in things we're bad at. We don't want to try things that we are fairly confident we will fail at. And so we just don't do it. And a lot of things we just won't do because we know we're not going to be successful. And so who wants to be a failure? Who wants to start at the beginning with the mindset, I'm going to fail at this? So we don't do it.
I will give a story as illustration of this, and it's not actually of our children, it's of me. When I was in 7th grade, I handed a piece of artwork into a teacher, and I had worked pretty hard on it, but I am not a visual artist. That's not one of my first abilities. But I thought I did a pretty good job. I was proud of what I had done, and I handed it in. And he put it on his desk in front of himself, and he said to me, I have seen 3rd graders do better work than this. And it crushed me. And I'd had all sorts of positive input in my life, but that very specific negative about an effort that I had made in an area that I felt already a little insecure in convinced me in that moment that I could never do anything like that. And I never did try to do art ever again. Yeah. I handed things in, but I didn't try and I didn't care. And it wasn't until I met you, and my parents knew what had happened, and they constantly tried to build me up, and everything I did that was artistic, they would praise and say, good job. But it never was enough to overcome that negative message.
Really shows you the power
of negative remarks. Negative, yes. And well-placed negative words. Yes. And then when I met you, and you're just kind of overflowing with art, creative talent, everything, you were always very exuberant and supportive and absolutely convinced that I was creative and that I was artistic. And I kept thinking that you were just a little bit deceived and not terribly bright, but I loved you nonetheless. And I didn't know that it was at work inside of me and was beginning. See, my parents, I figured, had to say those things to me because they were my parents. But you didn't have to. Right. You were this outside person who I respected and admired, and you were saying something that they had also already been trying to make me believe for quite a few years. And it wasn't until you encouraged me to become involved in a theatrical production as an adult that I began to think, maybe I do have some sort of creativity in me. Maybe the fact that I can't draw doesn't matter. And maybe I could even draw if I tried. Who knows? But I began experimenting, and I remember, and this sounds really pathetic, but I remember the first time that I made a dried flower arrangement. And I stepped back and I looked at it and I thought, that's beautiful. And I did it. Yes. And it took my breath away at how stunning it was that I could create something beautiful.
Yes. And, it's really heartbreaking to think of all the different kind of creative endeavors that have been squelched and that are lost. Mm-hmm. Because people have bought into those, as you said, those well-placed negative critical remarks that shut people down. And my story was, of course, quite the opposite. I got a lot of positive remarks. And when I was in school, the kids would say, well, have Dave go up and draw on the chalkboard what a corn stalk looks like or what a pumpkin looks like, because he's really good at that. So, yeah, that's what really drove me to art and to creativity, because I got positive remarks more than I got negative remarks. I still get the comments of like, what are you trying to draw there? Doesn't really look like what you're trying to draw. So yeah, you get stuff like that. But I do have a story about that. Again, just how, negative things can impact you. Because I do remember when I started doing cartooning, and a gal who was an author and who had submitted several articles to several magazines, mentioned to me that, a lot of these magazines are looking for cartoons. And I think you should draw some cartoons and submit them, because they're always looking for, funny cartoons. And so, that's all I needed. I put together a batch of cartoons, 10 of the funniest cartoons that you'll ever read, and sent them off to a magazine, and about a week and a half later, got them all back.
With a rejection slip.
With rejection slip.
Yes.
Thanks, but no thanks. And of course, I was thinking, maybe they're not as desperate as I thought they were, or that she thought they were. And that was hard. That was very difficult to take. And it was probably a year before I submitted again. Fortunately, I had a little success with the second submission, and then success upon that, averaging about one or two accepted cartoons out of a batch of 10. So it was fun. But I tell you, that first real, in my mind, negative response, total rejection, don't like any of those cartoons. That, it has a lot of impact. And even as a young adult, even though I'd had a lot of encouragement along the way, those negative impacts can be sometimes very devastating.
I think one of the things when you're thinking about making your child a hero is to ask, continue that metaphor of the story, to ask yourself, so what story line do we want our child to kind of follow? And I'm not saying that you determine where your kid's going to go and what their life is going to be like, but you have goals and desires as to what you want your child to experience and where, in a very loose sense, you want them to end up. I don't mean picking their vocation or who they're going to marry, where they're going to live. I just mean the kind of person that they're going to become. And we feel very strongly about reserving sex for marriage. And so we have a 13-year-old daughter, and we decided to take her on a retreat with just us, mom, dad, and the 13-year-old, and we left the 5-year-old with our relatives. And we spent an entire weekend just explaining our perspectives and reading the Bible and looking at things that God has to say about your body and your mind and what it means to be pure, that it has something to do with your thought processes. It has something to do with the way you treat other people. It has something to do with the way you respect your own self and your own body. It has something to do with your view of what marriage is and a respect for what marriage is and putting boundaries around things. And it was just an incredible weekend. We spent probably 15 hours, just one-on-one time, either you with her or me with her, working through concepts, talking, making sure that she understood what we were explaining, and then allowing her to just kind of figure some things out for herself. And then at the end of the weekend, she decided to sign a pledge saying that she would keep herself pure until she was ready to give herself to her husband in marriage. And she actually signed a piece of paper that said that. And after we left, a couple days later, she was talking about it, and she just thanked us effusively, saying, I can't believe that you guys would spend that much time just with me, and that you would go get a hotel, and that we would do fun stuff together, and that we would just spend all that time one-on-one. She just loved it, ate it up. Mm-hmm. And felt like we were really investing in her because we were appealing to her mind. We were appealing to her heart. We weren't just telling her things. We were listening to her opinions and her thoughts, asking her, what do you think? How do you feel? What is your sense of what this passage is trying to say? That kind of stuff. And she told me, she said, when I signed that pledge, I felt like I had reached out and shaken hands with God. And she talked about how she had never felt such a close fellowship with God until that event, and that it kind of changed the way she views things. She has a different view of her own study of the Bible now. She has a different perception of her interaction with members of the opposite sex. She's still trying to figure it all out. She's by no means got it all lined up, but she has a good basis and a foundation that she's thinking, okay, this is how it works.
Yeah. There's a self-confidence that gets built up inside of them, and you can literally see it on their face. The way their eyes light up and the way they display that countenance. The countenance that somebody believes in me, and my mom and my dad believe in me and they care about me, and that feeling that God believes in me. I shook hands with God. We made this deal because he believes in me, and I know I can do it, and he knows I can do it. And that that's worth the price of admission right there, to see that kind of countenance and that kind of confidence. And I tell you, when we do that with our 5-year-old, when we build her up and talk to her about the great things she's doing and her great accomplishments and her great drawings, it's so rewarding to see that countenance on her face as her face lights up and that smile, and her whole body gets involved in the exuberance, and she rushes off to the next creative endeavor. She believes that she's a hero. She believes she can accomplish what she sets her mind to.
And I think it's incremental steps. Right now, one of my big goals for our 5-year-old is that she get to a place where she's independent reading, an independent reader. So she's been sounding out words. We've worked on phonics, and she knows all the sounds that the letters make, and she can read really simple books. But the other day she pulled out a book that had some pretty complicated phrases in it. She's never read it herself. I've always read it to her. And I didn't tell her she needed to read it. She just opened it up and she started reading to me the first line. And sometimes kids remember books, and so they're just kind of reciting what they remember. She was not reciting it. She was sounding out the words. And when she got done with the first sentence, she suddenly realized that she had read that whole sentence by herself and had no problems. And she looked up at me and she just glowed and she screamed, "I did it! I did it!" And then she went racing through the house yelling, "Dad, I did it! I did it, Dad!" And anticlimactically, she couldn't find Dad.
Dad was out in the garage.
Dad was in the garage. But she was just shaking with excitement.
Yeah.
And the next time we pulled out a book, that excitement had lodged in her brain that I can do this.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of encourage that. And up until this point, I have regularly told her, "You are so good at this," as she would sound out words and start to get discouraged, because it's a long process to sound out the words. And so many words break rules, it's just kind of, sorry, you just have to memorize that word. And she would get discouraged and frustrated and I would say, "You are so good at this. Look at all these words that you have already sounded out. Let's just stick with it. One more page. I know you can do this. You are so good at this." And I believe truly that it's that kind of encouragement that led her up to her "I did it" moment.
Right.
When she finally realized, Mom's right. I am good at this.
Yeah. From the parent's standpoint, you might be thinking, boy, I'm just, as I stated earlier with my own self, I'm not very good at this. It's really hard for me to be effusive and to be bubbly, and that's just not in my nature. That's not my character. And so you might be thinking, yeah, I don't want to start doing something that I'm going to fail at, and that includes failing at being an encourager, failing at being somebody who builds people up. It doesn't really take much. And even when you think you're failing, you're not, as long as you're being honest. And that's where you have to start with just taking an honest evaluation of, as I really start to look at my child and make observations about my child, I do see good things. I do see good qualities. And sometimes I have to look real hard, but they're there. And now my next step is to put those observations into words. And
even if it feels artificial? Even if it feels almost unnatural?
Right.
It will, if you haven't done that very much. And I frequently feel very unnatural and artificial when I'm saying it. But I watch the response and I realize that's why you do it, because it's the right thing.
Exactly.
Because they need to hear it. Right. They're little sponges and they're hearing all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah.
And they've got to know that we believe in them and that we have been watching them and that we're attuned to who they are. And we have their best interests at heart and that we want them to develop and to turn into the people that they were created to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the challenge. Just making those observations and then turning your kid into a hero. And maybe even a superhero. In fact, I got to go right now because I think our daughter is jumping over
a banister,
a 14-story building, or maybe she's running faster than a train. I'm not sure, but anyway, I have to attend to that.
You go. I believe it's leaping over a building in a single bound.